Before the release of Star Trek: The Search for Spock, there were already plans by Paramount for a fourth Star Trek film. The studio was impressed with Leonard Nimoy's skills as a director and offered him the film to direct. This time, the studio would give Nimoy even more freedom. He said that Paramount flat out wanted his vision after the dramatic and darker films Wrath of Khan and The Search for Spock. Leonard Nimoy and producer Harve Bennett thought it was time to lighten up and have some fun, but add an environmental message to the story and have no main villain. This was a risk because the first film, Star Trek: The Motion Picture, had no villain, but the fourth film would have more character and story to it.
Yeah, we've done some pretty serious and heavy drama in the last three films. Lots of life and death and Sturm and Drang and operatic emotions and stuff like that, and we decided it was time to lighten up.
Nimoy and Bennett's first story idea was originally going to have the crew travel back in time to a rainforest and find a cure for a plague that is infecting the 24th century Earth, but decided that they had to keep the tone light. There were many story ideas. At one stage, they were even thinking of doing a prequel about the characters at Starfleet. This idea only came to them when they weren't sure if William Shatner was going to return after his clear reluctance. Shatner decided to return after he was offered a pay rise. Because of Shatner and Nimoy's raised salaries, Paramount actually had to lower the budget of its new series, Star Trek: The Next Generation, which was starting production. One early draft of the script was subtitled The Trial of James T. Kirk. This script involved Kirk being court-martialed at the request of the Klingons regarding the events in The Search for Spock. The character of Harry Mudd is included as a character witness. This idea was dropped. Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home did, however, keep the trial by the Klingons idea. Director Nimoy came up with the idea of using humpback whales after he read a book about extinct animals. Many writers were approached to write a script, like Daniel Petrie Jr., who was the writer of the comedy Beverly Hills Cop. Steve Mearson and Peter Crykes were also brought in to write a script. Their script drew the interest of star Eddie Murphy, who was a longtime Star Trek fan. He wanted a starring role in the film. Leonard Nimoy was thinking Murphy might attract the non-Star Trek fans to the franchise.
Beyond that, it's all conjecture because we haven't seen a story outline. We certainly haven't seen a screenplay since one hasn't been written yet. We have been told that it was going to be a lighter attack, that the story will have more fun and less melodrama, and it is conceivable that Eddie Murphy will be in the film. He has a definite interest. He's a big Star Trek fan. There are several contingencies that have to be met before he will be in the film. One, he has to like the script. Paramount has to make him available to do the film.
One of the ideas would revolve around college professor played by Eddie Murphy, who believes in aliens and enjoys playing whale songs. The professor teams up with a marine biologist and a female reporter to help the beloved crew. Murphy hated the part. He wanted to play an alien or a Starfleet officer. Eddie Murphy turned down the role and instead did the film The Golden Child. Eddie Murphy would long after regret turning down the role. Paramount declined the script anyway because they didn't want to combine their two most profitable franchises, Star Trek and Beverly Hills Cop. Nimoy finally decided to hire director Nicholas Meyer to co-write a script with producer Harve Bennett. They divided the story and each wrote different parts of the script. Bennett worked on the first quarter of the story, up to where the crew goes back in time. Meyer wrote the story's middle part, and Bennett handled the ending. William Shatner also offered his own notes and rewrites. The character of Gillian was actually based on a real female biologist, which Meyer saw profiled in a National Geographic documentary about whales. The character of Gillian was mainly put in the movie because William Shatner wanted to give Kirk a love interest. Shatner was said to be disappointed that the film series ignored the original Star Trek series depictions of Kirk having romances. In Nicholas Meyer's version of the script, Gillian Taylor stays in 1986 Earth and vows to ensure the survival of the humpback whale, despite the paradox it might create. Meyer even preferred this story. Meyer and Bennett cut out writers Crikes and Mearson's idea of having the bird of prey fly over the Super Bowl, and the twist that Saavik stayed on Vulcan because she was carrying Spock's baby. Saavik's character was left behind on Vulcan by the filmmakers because they really didn't know what to do with her in the film. Saavik was only featured in the first quarter of the film. Star Trek IV was Saavik's last appearance in Star Trek. However, actress Robin Curtis, who played Saavik, would later guest star as Telera in 2 Star Trek The Next Generation episodes, Gambit Part 1 and Part 2. The script was finalized and they decided to complete the story arc, which started with Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan and continued with Star Trek III The Search for Spock, starting with the beloved crew intent on returning home to face their crimes that they committed in their rescue of Spock. Their plans change when Earth is in danger because of an alien probe which is trying to contact humpback whales in the past that are extinct in the future. The old crew in the Klingon Bird of Prey go back in time to San Francisco in 1986 to find the whales that the probe is contacting. In casting the film, they cast actress Catherine Hicks in the role of Gillian Taylor. Shatner thought actress Catherine Hicks gave the best audition. Hicks was not at all familiar with Star Trek. She decided not to watch any of the original series episodes or the previous films after getting the role. She thought this would work better not being familiar with Trek for the character of Gillian, because she was such an outsider. Hicks studied whales to help prepare for the role. This film also marked the last time we would see the character Nurse Chapel. The 4th film would also be the first and only movie appearance by Spock's mother, Amanda, actress Jane Wyatt, who originated the role in the original series episode Journey to Babel, while Spock's father, Sarek, also appears in the movie. Mark Leonard would again reprise his role of Sarek in The Next Generation. Madge Sinclair would play an uncredited role of the female captain of the Saratoga. Actress Sinclair would later appear in the Next Generation 1993 episode Interface as Lieutenant Geordie LaForge's mother, Captain Sylvia LaForge. In Star Trek IV The Voyage Home, the character of Admiral Cartwright was played by actor Brock Peters. He would later reprise the role of Admiral Cartwright in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country in 1991. Brock Peters would also play Captain Sisko's father, Joseph, on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Industrial Light and Magic was hired for special effects, also model design and optical effects. About 95% of the humpback whale footage in the film were 4-foot-long animatronic models. The whales in Voyage Home were so realistic that after the release of the film, US fishing authorities publicly criticized the filmmakers for getting too close to the whales in the wild. The Voyage Home did not require any new starship designs. The bird of prey model from The Search for Spock was reused, but ILM built additional versions for the film's action sequences. The inside of the bird of prey was a different set, after the miniature of the space dock interior had been destroyed at the end of production of The Search for Spock and had to be rebuilt for The Voyage Home. As with previous Star Trek films, existing props and footage were reused where possible to save money, but The Voyage Home required less of this than previous films. Principal photography started on February the 24th, 1986. Nimoy chose Donald Peterman as director of photography. The film's opening scenes aboard the starship Saratoga were the first to be shot. When the time travel storyline was proposed, a few different time periods were considered. The time period of 1986 was selected largely to make use of the opportunity for extensive outdoor location shooting around San Francisco. The Voyage Home was the first Star Trek film to be filmed extensively on location. The on-location shots took over 10 days to shoot. In addition, there would be no budget constraints relating to the use of period costuming, sets and props. Robert Fletcher would again serve as costume designer. The Vulcan and the Bird of Prey exterior was created with a combination of matte paintings and a soundstage. They shot at the real-life Monterey Bay Aquarium, for the aquarium scenes. Walls and railings were measured and replicated, and shot in a pool underneath the Paramount parking lot. When the tour group is looking at George and Gracie's tank, they are actually staring at a brick wall. The whales were then added with special effects. The shots of Spock in the tank are a special effects shot against a blue screen. After Voyager in Star Trek the Motion Picture and 3 scenes in the Star Trek animated series, the whale is the largest life form Spock has mind melded with. All other underwater scenes in the San Francisco Bay were shot in a tank on Paramount's back lot. The shot of the whale swimming past the Golden Gate Bridge were filmed on location. The sound of the alien probe was actually the sound of a baby's heartbeat during a sonogram, slowed down and digitized. In the scene where Kirk and Spock are traveling on a public bus and encounter a punk rocker blaring his music on a boombox, Spock performs a Vulcan nerve pinch on the punk rocker. The inspiration of this scene came from Nimoy's personal experiences with a similar character on the streets of New York. Kirk Thatcher, an associate producer on the film, convinced Nimoy to let him play the role of the punk rocker. Thatcher, along with the sound designer on the film, wrote and recorded the song I Hate You. For the shot of Sulu flying the helicopter over San Francisco Bay, the filmmakers tried to get a pilot to fly the helicopter, but they were unable to. They accomplished the long shot using a radio-controlled model from Japan. Leonard Nimoy had many challenges making the movie, directing, and stepping into the role of Spock.
It's just very hard to do both jobs. Very tiring physically, too, because, particularly with the Spock character, because on days when I'd be in full makeup, it takes a couple hours to do that makeup, so you're doing putting in the full day as a director as well as the acting work and the makeup time. It's a long day.
The film featured a dedication. The cast and crew of Star Trek wish to dedicate this film to the men and women of the Spaceship Challenger, whose courageous spirit shall live to the 23rd century and beyond. This was a reference to the Space Shuttle Challenger, which exploded over Florida on January the 28th, 1986. Principal photography for the voyage home began 4 weeks after Challenger and its crew were lost. James Horner, composer for The Wrath of Khan and The Search for Spock, declined Nimoy's proposal to return for the voyage home. Nimoy hired his friend, Leonard Rosenman. Rosenman wrote an arrangement of Alexander Courage's Star Trek television theme as the title music for the voyage home, but Nimoy wanted an original composition. The score, I think, is very lackluster and lacking that grand, big sounding quality, like the scores for the motion picture Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock. Star Trek IV The Voyage Home was released on November the 26th, 1986, on Star Trek's 20th anniversary. The Voyage Home sold 81.3 million in tickets, more than the franchise's second or third film, and made almost as much as Star Trek the motion picture. The film's humor and unconventional story was well received by audiences, critics, and fans of the series. The special effects were also generally well received. Some critics noted that the effects played a lesser role in the film compared to the characters and dialogue, and most critics felt the lack of special effects allowed the cast to prove themselves as more capable actors. Outside of the US, the film's title was changed to The Voyage Home, Star Trek IV. This was done because Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, had done very poorly overseas. The movie was released shortly after Star Trek The Next Generation was released. The film technically provided the first connection between the Star Trek movies and The Next Generation. Star Trek IV The Voyage Home is one of the most beloved films of the Star Trek franchise. It not only related to a loyal Star Trek base of fans, but also to non-Star Trek fans as well. The film is also very light-hearted in its approach, and the characters have a lot more to contribute. There is also a lot more humor in the film. It's not my favourite of the films, but I loved it. Leonard Nimoy really proved how good a director he could be, and how much loyalty and love he had for Star Trek. The interaction between the crew in this film is just pure magic, and shows us what we loved about Trek in the first place. It's a very engaging and funny good character film. Characters whom we care very deeply about and love, and having a good message that we need to take care of our planet or lose it forever. My name's Jonathan, thanks for watching, and please subscribe if you haven't already.